I know to some extent we all value our education, at least enough to make sure that our teachers and professors are teaching us the correct information. None of us want to be limited or taught the wrong information in any of our subjects. I know we all want the professionals in our lives that we rely on to be up to date with the latest techniques and not stuck a century in the past. That's why I think it's important that I'm here to talk to you about lactate research today and why we need to continue to fund it. Lactic acid is not the same as lactate. The common phrase, feel the burn, spreads misinformation as well as destroys interest in the study of lactate and continues to provide a deep misunderstanding of what it truly does. Lactic acid is what you have in spoiled milk, right? It does not exist in the human body, right? Lactate does. Lactate is one of the most important substrates in the body. And yet there wasn't an experiment really to test what lactate really was until the 1920s. I believe it was 1926 by Dr. Meyerhoff. And his experiments basically took the bottom half of frogs and gave them electrical stimulations to provide movement and contraction, which provided the stimulation for glycolysis to occur. And the end product of glycolysis is lactate when done in an anaerobic state, such as death. This is important because lactate was then given a byproduct slash waste product tag, and it didn't really change at all until the 1970s. We didn't even really start to research it until Dr. Brooks came along, and it since went from a byproduct to kind of just a little bit of another step. And now that it's hit the mainstream in about 2018, we started to see what it has really become. Um, and that's important, right? Because lactate is really, really important. It's the one of the main products of energy production. It's one of the main stages in ATP production. Um, and there's no reason it should be still taught as lactic acid, even to children. We know that children are being taught what mitochondria does. We know from a very young age that it is the powerhouse of the cell. I remember, I know that ATP is taught to be part of a pyruvate process, and in about sixth grade science. Um, and it shouldn't be taught as a waste product of glycolysis because, glycolysis is there to turn glucose into pyruvate into ATP. And as much as that is kind true, that is what happens, right? Glucose and pyruvate can't enter the mitochondria of the cell to produce ATP. That's the job of lactate. Lactate can enter the mitochondria. So when we're sitting there going, glucose turns into pyruvate, which turns into ATP in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, we're skipping a really, really key step there, and that is lactate. And why is the study of lactate important, right? What does that show us? Well, coincidentally, that's a big thing in, like, I don't know, cancer research. Cancer cells rely on glycolysis to do their general ATP production. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get enough oxygen from the body, from the blood to grow at the rates that they do. Um, Stopping lactate production in those cells, which is really hard to do, but if you could figure out a way to do it, would be a universal cure for all cancers. Because that is what gives them their ability to just reproduce and reproduce and reproduce and redivide and divide and divide and spread and cause issues. Um, in addition to that, traumatic brain injuries and brain neural functions, right? Those are all largely lactate fueled. Uh, the brain really, really prefers it. It travels well through the blood. It's largely produced in areas like the liver, thanks to gluconeogenesis and just the liver being one of the main places for glycolysis to occur due to it having a lot of fat actually stored into it, and lactate can be made produced from fat through gluconeogenesis, which can then be lactate that lactate can then be turned into pyruvate in the mitochondria and then into ATP, which produces energy. But that's important, right? In addition to the energy being brought to the brain, it's important because those hydrogen ions, those H plus ions that are brought during the lactate shuttle and active transportation are largely what helps stimulate the neural firings and the electrical simulations in the brain. So having an excess amount of them really, really helps the recovery of brain function after traumatic brain injuries and concussions and stuff. Um, and it's important to be teaching up-to-date ideas and methods. Like the historical approach to gangrene pre-Civil War era was surgery, right? I mean, that's what Hippocrates used to suggest. And post Civil War, we know that debriding and washing with antiseptics and stuff is great. And now it's to the point where we have treatments where you're in safe hospital rooms and beds instead of tents and laying on cots in the dirt. Um, you know, inoculation was a great way to start vaccinations and stuff, but inoculation for COVID would have been a great way to just infect everybody instead of actually creating vaccines. Um, and that's why when it comes to funding with the political climate that we're in right now, um, doesn't really matter which way you swing, in my opinion. It's really important that we fund research like this because it really shows it really could save a lot of people's lives. Making sure brains function properly is great. And with the way that modern medicine is going in the United States, cancer research and cancer should be the leading cause of death. Um, so got to make sure that it stays funded. So you got to talk to your governor and talk to mail your state representatives and your state your state representatives. Because it's important. And so today I've talked to you about lactate and common misunderstandings plaguing the common teaching methods, the detrimental effects of misinformation, and why lactate is important, why it needs to be taught properly, why it needs to continue to be funded as far as research goes, and how to help maintain research continuing. Thanks.